All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Friday edition of This Week at CFSA. Today, we are going to be continuing our May theme of talking about meat processing, a lot of the issues surrounding meat processing, and then some possible solutions to the issues. Whenever we have the Sustainable Agriculture Conference or any other types of policy inquiries at CFSA, one of the issues we continue to hear a lot about is meat processing. It's a consistent issue that our members bring up. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that issue with someone who might know more than anybody else in this country about some of the legal nuances around this. So we're happy to have Kelly Nuckolls from the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. Kelly holds an LLM in Agricultural and Food Law from the University of Arkansas Law School, a JD from Drake University Law School, and she has a BA in Political Science from Fort Hays State University. She previously worked at the University of Maryland with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, where she helped farmers manage legal risks and understand federal and state laws that impact their operations. She also staffs the INSAC Food System Integrity Committee, and she and I have worked together a lot recently on the Small Meat Working Group to try to war game and figure out some scenarios and how to figure out a way to improve the meat processing sector and community in the United States. And then myself, I'm Matt Kneece. I'm the South Carolina Policy Coordinator here with Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. And so we're going to go ahead and launch right into it. Kelly, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, now that we've got introductions out of the way, for folks watching, we're just going to go ahead and launch right into it. As I mentioned, one of the things that we've heard a lot about are the bottlenecks in the meat processing industry all around the country. And our members in North and South Carolina consistently have brought up the bottlenecks and the long wait times at a lot of the USDA inspected facilities. I know here in South Carolina, we've got the facility over in Kingstree, over in the eastern part of the state, and then there's the other facility up in Anderson. So these are both geographic extremes in the state where there's multiple hour drive times to get there. Similar situation in North Carolina. So I wanted to pose the first question to you, Kelly. What are some of the biggest causes of these bottlenecks that we're seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question and not an easy one to answer. There are a lot of factors that have contributed to the bottlenecks in processing over the years. And it really kind of depends on what area of the country you're into. But historically, there have been a decline in the number of small plants, especially federally inspected plants, on the USDA inspection side for a number of reasons, including some regulatory changes that happened in the late 1990s, some economic issues that did not make small plants as viable anymore, some workforce shortage issues, among several other things. And so that's why when we're going to talk about solutions, a one-size-fits-all solution is really hard. It really depends on the area and the need and how to address all of these different issues there. But one issue that we like to talk quite a bit about at the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition is consolidation in this sector and how that's contributed to the decline in processing access for farmers and ranchers as farms grew larger, plants grew larger, and that consolidation also contributed to these problems. For example, 4 large packers control 85% of the beef production in the United States. And so that's kind of, as we saw the COVID-19 pandemic start to cause even more bottlenecks in this supply chain, that issue of consolidation came to center stage. The large processing plants, they closed. Some farmers shifted to new opportunities into these small processing facilities. There were also a lot of new market opportunities for small livestock producers as consumers kind of shifted their buying patterns. They might have gone to the grocery store and they saw none of the commodity meat was there anymore. They might have read some articles about how these corporations were treating their workers and decided to shift their buying patterns there. So kind of that combination of some farmers shifting to wanting to control their processing more and farmers that were using small processors seeing an increased interest in these products really contributed to this increased bottleneck that existed before the pandemic, but Now it's, I think, worse than it ever has been in several decades.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier there were some regulatory changes in the late 90s that really contributed and laid some of the groundwork for these bottlenecks. Can you speak at all to what some of those regulatory changes were in the late 90s?
Yeah, so one big one was the hazard analysis critical control points regulatory requirements, otherwise known as HACCP. We like to use acronyms a lot. And so these HACCP requirements, HACCP plans, weren't really written to be scale appropriate. They were written for the very large facilities. And so that's something that we've worked on quite a bit, just kind of talking to USDA, thinking how can we assist small processors, especially new processors, with all these HACCP requirements.
Interesting, interesting. In terms of the situation we found ourselves in, a lot of the member farms that we've talked to at CFSA, when they will come to us with policy concerns, a lot of the policy concerns tend to be, obviously they'll all be detrimental to businesses, or there are things that we can do to help improve the situation and make situations better for businesses. But when it comes to meat processing, there's an extra kind of undercurrent of, I won't say desperation, but almost desperation, where they will come to us and say, look, this is not sustainable for us as a business. We can't afford to keep making these long travels. We can't afford to wait 6, 9, 12 months to get into some of these facilities. Something's got to change. And so some of the conversations that I've had with people like the South Carolina Department of Agriculture and then other national folks, there's been a lot of discussion about what exactly is needed at these existing processors to break up the logjam and move the bottlenecks along. And one of the things that's been discussed are infrastructure grants. Can you speak to, essentially what some of these infrastructure grants could do, and then whether or not, some of the, the COVID relief money that a lot of these states have could be used as a source of the money for these infrastructure grants?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I think again, it's going to depend on where you are and what the situation is. But if done correctly, infrastructure grants could really help address some of the bottlenecks that you're seeing probably at your local plants. What we consider a fairly small amount of money, like maybe like $200,000 to $500,000 at already existing facilities could really help them serve more customers, process more animals. There's a lot of, needs that small processors saw too. You kind of talked about the desperation. I think small processors feel that desperation. They want to be able to serve the farmers that really need to have their products processed. And so a fairly significant, but also in the grand scheme of just any sort of ag spending, it's pretty minimal. Some grants of like $200,000 to $500,000 could really make a difference in those already existing facilities if done correctly. And we've seen some states use some of that COVID-19 federal money that they were given during the pandemic to create small grants. It kind of is varied state to state on what those processing grants looked like. Some, it was such a small amount that it didn't really make a difference, like under $100,000. In other states, it was so much money that 30 new plants popped up in that state, which is a little concerning. We also are concerned about like the viability of small plants that do exist and new ones that come online. And we really want to make sure that, a year from now, they don't shut down because they're not financially stable. And then we have even worse backlogs. So really kind of thinking through the right dollar amount and ensuring like it's feasible given, the livestock producers in the area. Those are some key aspects of creating a successful program through some of that state COVID-19 relief money.
Yeah, interesting. And I know that here in South Carolina, when I had a few conversations, this is immediately pre-COVID, but I had a few conversations with some folks in South Carolina at some larger ag organizations, and I mentioned how a lot of farmers and livestock producers have wanted to know why they're in South Carolina anyway, why there are only 2 USDA inspected facilities. Why can't we construct and create a third one? And the response in general was something to the effect of, when you look at the marketplace, you've got to ask yourself why is there a reason there's not a third one? And there was heavily implied that there's no financial incentive or motivation to construct a new processing plant. And if there was an incentive, it would have been done by now or would be done in the near future. And I know in our INSAC meat process, small meat working group, we've floated the idea of things like funded feasibility studies. Can you speak a little bit to the funded feasibility studies and the role they might play in kind of assessing what the landscape looks like in a given area and whether or not a new processor could be beneficial?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. There might even be some existing USDA grant programs that could fund a feasibility study, maybe something like the local food promotion program. But overall, it will really help. Like if you're thinking of starting a new processing facility in an area, kind of think about, where are there farmers that would want to access this processing facility? What's the volume? What's the appropriate, economics of that volume and the scale of the plant that I might consider building? I think we've heard time and time again that it's hard to employ someone year round because farmers want their items processed at a certain time of year. And so kind of thinking through that, like, is there some flexibility with the farmers in the area to process at the non-busy time of the year to help kind of support and financially lift up that plant so they can succeed. So I think it's really important. Again, we don't want probably 30 new plants in South Carolina. That could actually maybe end badly, but there might be a need, and a feasibility study is a really great way to find out. And there's a lot of technical assistance out there too. The Niche Meat Processors Assistance Network might be a great place to go if you're interested in learning more about feasibility studies and what that could look like.
Awesome. And as we continue to talk about potential solutions on ways to kind of break up this logjam and improve the situation for small livestock producers, we've talked a lot about grants and feasibility studies. There are several pieces of federal legislation that have been floating around that are attempting to address this problem. One of them that a lot of our members are excited about is the Strengthening Local Processors Act. We've had lots of calls and emails about how people can get involved. Can you take just a moment and talk a little bit about what exactly the Strengthening Local Processors Act would do, and then how it might affect the situation on a national level?
Yeah, so the Strengthening Local Processors Act is a fairly comprehensive bill. Again, it's really hard because one solution is not going to fix all the problems, but this is the most comprehensive thing we've seen. So there might be other things we need to address later on, but this bill has 5 big parts to it that could maybe help address some of the issues we've been talking about. The first one relates back to that regulation that I talked about, the HACCP plans, which are just like big food safety plans. And they're required for any federally inspected facility, and state inspected facilities also have to kind of meet similar requirements since they're equivalent to federal inspection. And so this would provide some support for any small processor, maybe a new one, maybe an existing one that's trying to, model an appropriate plan for their facility. As I mentioned, it kind of feels like the regulation was written for large facilities and not small facilities. And so this is to help require USDA to do some more guidance and support for small processors. There's 2 sections beyond that really focus on supporting state inspection and similarly the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Program. So if you're a farmer out there or a processor even that uses a state inspected facility and that process, maybe this would encourage you and that state that you're in to enter into the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Program, which would basically allow farmers and ranchers to then sell those state inspected products across state lines. And then there are 2 final sections that are both grant programs. One is an infrastructure grant program. The funding is up to $500,000 for any facility. It could be, a new facility that, maybe wants to do a feasibility study. It could be a custom exempt facility that wants to expand and grow. It could be a state inspected facility that wants to expand and grow. And it could be a small, or what we call very small, per USDA definitions, plant that wants to expand and grow at the federal level. So any type of small plant can apply if the program were to pass for that infrastructure grant support. The last grant program is really focused on education and technical assistance and just kind of supporting the next generation of meat processors. So as I mentioned, there's been some shortages in the workforce. And so this would hopefully help kind of create programming to really talk about what it's like to work in a small plant and to provide those skills. As I mentioned, small processors are extremely busy right now, and it's really hard to find the time to train new employees. So hopefully this would help alleviate some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And regarding the Strengthening Local Processors Act, we have, in the same vein that we've had a lot of members reach out to us asking how they can get involved on meat processing issues and try to advocate and be more effective advocates in their community and at the state, at the federal level. What are some ways that anyone listening to this broadcast could explore if they wanted, if this is an issue that means a lot to them or they're affected by it and they want to try to affect change? What can you do? I know we've talked a lot about grassroots engagement on the Strengthening Local Processors Act. Maybe start there, and then just kind of anything else that you think of on where people should start. Where could they look?
Yeah. So on our website, which is sustainableagriculture.net, we have a Take Action page. And on the Take Action page right now, we have a bunch of tools for you all to use to talk to your member of Congress about the Strengthening Local Processing Act. We're really hoping that maybe sometime this year, or even looking forward into the Farm Bill, some of these ideas can be included. And so it would be great if you could, take a look, maybe send an email or make a phone call on the Strengthening Local Processing Act. Beyond that, I would say, again, this bill is a great start. It's bipartisan. It's garnered a lot of support so far, but there are other solutions that we need to fix this problem across the country. And so I would say, share with the CFSA team, Farm Bill related ideas that's starting to be discussed. And at INSAC, we're really hoping that, this could be a big part of our Farm Bill platform. And so sharing any ideas that you might have with Matt, I'll just say Matt, since he's kind of the CFSA lead on this. I think that's a great start, because we need more ideas and we need more voices to really hopefully address this issue.
And shameless plug off of that. Thank you for that, Kelly. Shameless plug for those who are attending our Sustainable Agriculture Conference coming up this fall. We're in the early stages of trying to figure out whether or not the mechanics and logistics of having a Farm Bill listening session, partnering with INSAC and some other organizations to try to figure out, because the Farm Bill is coming up, and it feels like the last one just left, a year or two ago, and I guess it was technically, 2 or 3 years ago. With the new Farm Bill on the horizon, now is the time to start figuring out what moves need to be made for the next Farm Bill. What should be included? What differences can be made? And so we're really excited for that listening session to occur, and really get feedback from CFSA members and member farms, and say, what do you need? Where can we really make a difference? What impacts can be made? So stay tuned for more details on that as the Sustainable Agriculture Conference arrives on the horizon for this fall. And check out CarolinaFarmStewards.org for more details as we start to take signups for the conference. One or two more questions here before we wrap up today. Because this issue is so nuanced on so many levels between state jurisdictions and federal jurisdictions, I know there have been lots of different solutions tossed around, and you're right, there is certainly no one-size-fits-all plan. One of the things I learned from working with the INSAC working group is that this is such a nuanced approach that has to be taken to address this. Can you speak to a little bit about you mentioned a little bit about the workforce aspects of the Strengthening Local Processors Act. Are there potential grants that states or anywhere could explore on, workforce development? I've heard from people who actually work at the processor here in South Carolina over in Kingstree, who say that, meat processing, it's really hard to keep people in this job because it's already kind of a stressful job. And there's a lot of, misunderstandings around it and a lot of, kind of stereotypes. So can you speak to a little bit here about, a role that workforce grants could play? How do we bolster that workforce?
Yeah. I think, again, this is an issue that we've heard a lot of different solutions on, and it's not like a one size fits all either. But I think states could explore this. Some states they've supported community college programs, cooperative extension programs that are really focused on apprenticeships and training, someone who maybe wants to work in a small processor one day and providing them with those skills. I hear from small processors, it's a wide variety of skills that are needed, from someone who can help manage a HACCP plan to someone who can work on the kill floor. And so those, programs are really designed to help, support someone who's interested in this as a long-term career path. They're usually pretty small. And so expanding programs like that, it's not the easiest thing to do, but with some state support, that could be possible. And then another idea that I've heard quite a bit lately from our small processor network, which includes operators and employees, is an idea of a government-funded apprenticeship program where the small plant would be required to pay maybe $15 an hour, and then the government would support an additional maybe $5 an hour for that employee to spend a certain time training hands-on in a plant, a small plant. So lots of different ideas out there. I think that's something too we'd like to hear more ideas about, because it's definitely going to be different depending on where you are, what it takes to kind of work on those issues.
Terrific. And one last question here, unless anyone, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We'll be happy to answer those. I'll occasionally, as the policy coordinator for South Carolina, I will get and field questions from member farms who not only are they affected by this issue, but they will come up with, they'll want to know why other solutions aren't being explored at the state or the federal level. And one that I've heard coincidentally a lot about in recent weeks is this concept of mobile processing units, mobile livestock processing units. We see this a lot in South Carolina around the time of Thanksgiving. We'll have turkey producers in the state who will have, there'll be mobile poultry processing units that will go farm to farm to do this for them, so they won't have to actually make this giant travel. What experience, if any, have you had in working or exploring mobile processing units as a solution? Is this something that's feasible? And if it's something that states want to really explore and expand upon, or even start their own program if they don't have one already, is this something that could be done through an infrastructure grant? Is this a federal issue? I mean, where does mobile processing units fall in this kind of jurisdiction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've heard this a lot. And I think there's a little bit of hesitancy there. Mobile processing is difficult for a number of reasons. The regulatory requirements are sometimes really difficult. And there's also issues with getting an inspector to travel around with the mobile processing unit at times. But overall, I've heard a lot of really creative, innovative ideas related to mobile processing. So again, I don't know if I'm going to give a direct answer, but it probably depends on your area, whether or not it's feasible. And it's not easy. There's a lot of regulatory requirements, but I think that it's something that an infrastructure grant is able to pay for, at least the ones that some certain states have done. The program we're trying to get passed at the federal level, So it's a possibility. I would just like proceed with caution, I guess, and make sure that you understand that it's fairly difficult to meet the regulatory requirements, and also just travel around and ensure that you'll have an inspector available.
And just to echo that, we've had lots of similar solutions, be it mobile processing units or other ideas that have been kind of suggested to us. Why isn't SCDA doing X, or why isn't North Carolina doing this, or why are the feds not doing this? And as Kelly has mentioned multiple times, the regulatory landscape that's been created has become such a legal landmine, because there have been instances where states have tried to explore solutions and the feds have come in and cracked down. There have been issues where states are trying to explore other solutions and the feds have kind of not issued guidance, but we're not really sure. So this is something that's being tackled from multiple directions, and NSAC is kind of at the tip of the spear and trying to figure out what some of these solutions are. We at CFSA will continue to explore this, working with NSAC. We'd encourage you all to check out the Strengthening Local Processors Act online. We're happy to answer any grassroots advocacy questions you may have. This is an area where you can make a difference. Again, it doesn't solve everything, but it solves a lot. And so we're really, really excited about the prospects for this bill at the federal level. Kelly, is there anything else that you feel like we haven't covered, or things that you feel like we should address?
Not at the moment. Just if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And yeah, it's been fun talking about this issue, and I hope that with the next farm bill we can really push what could happen to address these problems.
Yes, absolutely. And just to reiterate, CFSA members, you have the opportunity to give input on this, especially at the Sustainable Agriculture Conference this year. If you can't make it, email me at matt@carolinafarmstewards.org. We're happy to incorporate anything you'd like into our discussion. We definitely want to see what we can do with this farm bill coming up. And I know that it seems like it's still a few years out, but it's better to do this early, because it is a long, arduous process for sure every time the farm bill comes up. So we're looking forward to seeing what can happen. There's exciting things on the horizon. Stay tuned. We appreciate you joining us for this Friday This Week at CFSA broadcast. Kelly, our wonderful guest, thank you for being here. And we will catch you all next time.